Lieutenant Sarah. Chen adjusted her rifle scope one final time as the transport ship descended through the crimson atmosphere of Kepler, 442b. The other passengers in the military compartment kept their distance, their alien features twisted in what she had learned to recognize as contempt. 3 months into humanity's first integration with the Galactic Defense Coalition, and the reception remained ice-cold. The Zephyrian commander, General Vexitar, stood nearly 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin that shifted colors based on his mood. Currently, it displayed a sickly yellow that Sarah knew meant disgust. His voice carried the mechanical translation of the universal communicator as he addressed the assembled troops. "Today, we test the supposed capabilities of the human contingent," Vexitar announced, his multiple eyes focusing on Sarah. "The Coalition has seen fit to include these primitive beings in our ranks despite their obvious physical limitations." Sarah felt the familiar burn of anger in her chest, but kept her expression neutral. She had heard it all before. Humans were too small, too weak, too slow. Their technology was centuries behind the Coalition standard. Their lifespans were laughably short compared to most galactic species. The Thraxians lived for over 400 years. The crystalline entities existed for millennia, and even the Zephyrians could expect 2 centuries of life. "The female specimen claims proficiency with projectile weapons," Vexitar continued, and Sarah caught the subtle vibrations that indicated laughter among the alien troops. "An archaic skill that has no place in modern warfare." The Thraxian Captain Krell stepped forward, his rocky exterior clicking as he moved. "General, with respect, why waste time on this demonstration? Human reflexes are demonstrably inferior. Their visual acuity is limited to a narrow spectrum. Their muscle density is inadequate for precision work under stress." Sarah checked her gear methodically, ignoring the scientific discussion of her species' supposed inferiority. Her rifle was a hybrid creation, human-designed but enhanced with Coalition materials that could withstand the harsh conditions of alien worlds. The stock was worn smooth from countless hours of practice, and the scope had been calibrated to her exact specifications. "Perhaps," Vexitar mused. But the human delegation insisted on this demonstration. "They claim their sniper can achieve accuracy rates that exceed our best marksmen." His skin shifted to a deeper yellow. "Impossible, of course, but amusing nonetheless." The transport shuddered as it touched down on the rocky surface of the training planet. Through the viewport, Sarah could see the sprawling military complex that served as the Coalition's primary testing facility. Obstacle courses stretched across the barren landscape, punctuated by towering structures that housed various simulation chambers. As the troops filed out, Sarah noticed how the aliens naturally segregated themselves from the human contingent. There were only 12 humans on this mission, all specialists in different fields. She was the only sniper, and the weight of representing not just herself but her entire species pressed down on her shoulders. The testing range was a marvel of alien engineering. Holographic targets could be programmed to move in complex patterns, react to threats, and even shoot back with harmless energy beams that registered hits on the participants' armor. The distance markers stretched out to nearly 2 kilometers, far beyond what most species considered practical for personal weapons. "The challenge is simple," Vexitar explained to the gathered troops. 12 targets at varying distances and elevations. Each target will be active for precisely 10 seconds before relocating. The current record is held by Sniper Prime Gex of the Thraxian Elite Guard, who eliminated 7 targets in the allotted time. Sarah studied the terrain through her scope, noting wind patterns, elevation changes, and potential obstacles. The aliens around her were placing bets on how many targets she might hit. The consensus seemed to be 2, maybe 3 if she was exceptionally lucky. "The human will attempt this challenge first," Vexitar announced. "As our guest species, it seems only fitting." Sarah stepped up to the firing line, feeling hundreds of alien eyes upon her. She had trained for this moment for months, pushing her body and mind to their absolute limits. The human delegation had chosen her not just for her marksmanship skills, but for her ability to perform under pressure. The targets materialized across the range, each one a different shape and size. Some moved in predictable patterns while others jerked randomly through the air. The furthest target sat nearly 1,800 meters away, a distance that would challenge even the most advanced alien technology. "Begin," Vexitar commanded. Sarah took a deep breath and let her training take over. Time seemed to slow as she acquired her first target, a hexagonal shape dancing through the air at 800 meters. Her finger found the trigger and the rifle spoke with its familiar voice. The target exploded in a shower of holographic fragments. The second target was closer but moving erratically. Sarah compensated for its movement pattern, leading it by just the right amount. Another hit. The alien chatter around her began to quiet as she systematically worked through the targets. By the time she reached the sixth target, the range had fallen completely silent. Even the automated system seemed to pause in acknowledgement of what was happening. The seventh target fell, then the eighth. Each shot was perfect, each calculation flawless. The ninth target was the most challenging yet, a small sphere that moved in 3 dimensions at maximum range. Sarah adjusted for the planet's unique atmospheric conditions, its slightly lighter gravity, and the alien materials that made up the target itself. The shot rang out and another target died, 10 targets down with seconds to spare. Sarah located the 11th target, a rapidly spinning cylinder at 1,500 meters. The calculation required split-second timing and perfect compensation for the target's rotation. She fired and the target ceased to exist. 12 seconds remained when she found the final target. It was the furthest one, sitting at the edge of her effective range and moving in a complex spiral pattern. This was the shot that would either cement her reputation or confirm every prejudice the aliens held about humanity. Sarah steadied her breathing, felt her heartbeat slow, and became one with her weapon. The universe narrowed to a single point of focus. She squeezed the trigger. The final target exploded in a brilliant cascade of light, and the range fell into absolute silence. Sarah lowered her rifle, steam rising from the barrel in the cool alien air. She had done it. 12 targets in under 30 seconds, shattering the previous record by a margin that defied comprehension. General Vexitar's skin had shifted to a pale blue that Sarah didn't recognize from her cultural briefings. His forearms hung motionless at his sides as he stared at the holographic display showing the results. 12 perfect hits, 0 misses. Time elapsed 28.7 seconds. This is impossible, Captain Krell muttered, his rocky exterior making grinding sounds as he shifted nervously. The targeting systems must be malfunctioning. No organic being can achieve such precision at those distances. Sarah watched as alien technicians swarmed over the equipment, running diagnostic after diagnostic. She knew they would find nothing wrong with their systems because there was nothing wrong with them. She had simply done what humans had been doing for thousands of years: adapted, overcome, and exceeded expectations. A new figure approached the group, and Sarah immediately recognized the imposing form of Admiral Thrace, Supreme Commander of the Coalition's Third Fleet. The ancient being moved with fluid grace despite his massive size, his tentacled face displaying patterns that indicated deep thought. "Run the diagnostics again," Admiral Thrace commanded in his deep, resonant voice. "I want confirmation that this performance was achieved without technological assistance." While the technicians worked, Sarah noticed how the other alien troops now looked at her. The casual dismissal had been replaced by something else: wariness, confusion, and in some cases what might have been respect. The human delegation members beamed with pride, but Sarah kept her expression neutral. This was just the beginning. "Admiral," the chief technician reported after several minutes, "all systems are functioning within normal parameters. The targets were acquired and eliminated through conventional marksmanship. No evidence of technological enhancement or system manipulation." Admiral Thrace's tentacles writhed in what Sarah had learned was the equivalent of a frown. "Explain to me how a species with inferior reflexes and limited visual capability achieved a feat that our best snipers consider impossible." Dr. Elizabeth Reyes, the human team's xenobiologist, stepped forward. She was a small woman in her 50s, but her voice carried the authority of decades spent studying alien physiology. "With respect, Admiral, your assessment of human capabilities is based on incomplete data." The aliens turned their attention to her, and Sarah could sense their skepticism. Dr. Reyes had faced this kind of doubt countless times during the integration process. Human evolution took a different path than most coalition species. Dr. Reyes continued, "While other species developed specialized sensory organs or enhanced physical capabilities, humans developed something more valuable: adaptability and pattern recognition." General Vexitar's skin shifted to a darker yellow. "Explain." "Humans are persistence hunters," Dr. Reyes said, gesturing to Sarah. "For hundreds of thousands of years, We tracked prey across vast distances, reading subtle signs and anticipating behavior patterns. Our brains developed an almost supernatural ability to calculate trajectory, wind effects, and target movement. Sarah remembered her grandfather's stories about hunting in the mountains of Colorado, how he could track a deer for miles through snow and forest, reading signs that were invisible to others. That same instinct, refined and focused, had served her well today. Furthermore, Dr. Reyes continued, human visual processing is more sophisticated than your scans suggest. We don't just see with our eyes. We see with our minds, filling in gaps, predicting outcomes, and processing multiple variables simultaneously. A new voice cut through the discussion. Interesting theory, Doctor, but one demonstration proves nothing. Sarah turned to see Commander Zixtel of the Vorthon Empire approaching. The Vorthons were relatively new to the coalition, having joined only 50 years earlier, but they had quickly established themselves as master tacticians. Zixtel's crystalline body reflected the harsh light of the alien sun, and his voice carried the musical tones characteristic of his species. Commander Zixtel, Admiral Thrace acknowledged. You have thoughts on this matter? Indeed, Zixtel replied, his crystal face shifting to focus on Sarah. The Vorthons believe in testing capabilities under adverse conditions. If this human's abilities are truly superior, let us see how she performs when the stakes are real. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the alien atmosphere. She could sense where this was heading, and she wasn't sure she liked it. What do you propose? Admiral Thrace asked. The siege of Mordax Prime, Zixtel said simply, and several aliens around him made sounds of alarm. The separatist forces have fortified the capital city. Our conventional assault teams have failed to breach their defenses. Perhaps it's time to test whether human ingenuity can succeed where coalition strength has failed. Mordax Prime. Sarah had heard whispers about the ongoing conflict. A coalition world had declared independence 6 months ago, and the resulting siege had become a bloody stalemate. Thousands of coalition troops had been lost trying to retake the city. That is a combat zone, Dr. Reyes protested. Our agreement was for training exercises and integration programs, not active combat deployment. Commander Zixtel's crystalline features rearranged themselves into what Sarah assumed was a smile. The human performed well against stationary targets in controlled conditions. But can she maintain that accuracy when enemy snipers are shooting back? When artillery is falling around her? When the lives of coalition soldiers depend on her skills? The challenge hung in the air like a physical presence. Sarah understood the politics at play here. The coalition had accepted humanity as junior members, but acceptance and respect were two different things. This was her chance to prove that humans belonged among the galactic community's elite forces. I'll do it, Sarah said quietly, and every alien head turned toward her. Lieutenant Chen, Dr. Reyes began, but Sarah cut her off with a raised hand. Doctor, with respect, this is exactly why I'm here. Not to hit targets on a range, but to show what humans can do when it matters. She looked directly at Admiral Thrace. What are the mission parameters? The Admiral's tentacles moved in slow, deliberate patterns. The separatist leadership has barricaded themselves in the city's central tower. Our intelligence indicates at least 12 high-value targets occupy the upper floors. The building is surrounded by enemy snipers and automated defense systems. Previous attempts to eliminate the leadership have failed. How long do I have? Sarah asked. The main assault begins at dawn tomorrow, Admiral Thrace replied. If you can eliminate the leadership before our troops breach the outer defenses, it could save thousands of lives on both sides. Sarah nodded, her mind already working through the tactical possibilities. A real mission, with real stakes and the eyes of the entire coalition upon her. This was what she had trained for her entire life. The transport ship cut through the darkness of space toward Mordax Prime, carrying Sarah and a small reconnaissance team toward what would either be her greatest triumph or her final mission. Through the viewport, she could see the planet growing larger, its surface scarred by months of orbital bombardment and ground warfare. Major Harrison Pike, the human military liaison, sat across from her reviewing tactical data. He was a career soldier who had volunteered for the Alien Integration Program, despite being months away from retirement. His weathered face showed concern as he studied the intelligence reports. The situation is worse than they let on, Pike said quietly, ensuring the alien crew members couldn't overhear. The separatists have been preparing for this siege for years. They've turned the capital into a fortress city with overlapping fields of fire and redundant defense systems. Sarah studied the holographic map floating between them. The target building rose nearly 2 kilometers into the sky, its surface bristling with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. Enemy sniper positions were marked in red throughout the surrounding cityscape, creating a deadly web of crossfire. The previous coalition sniper teams were eliminated within hours of insertion, Pike continued. The Thoraxian team made it closest to the target, but they were spotted and killed before they could take the shot. What's different about their approach versus ours? Sarah asked, noting the insertion points and routes the previous teams had taken. They relied on superior technology and brute force, better armor, more powerful weapons, advanced cloaking systems. The Separatists adapted and found ways to counter each technological advantage. Sarah nodded, understanding the underlying message. The aliens had fallen into the trap of assuming that better technology automatically meant better results. It was a mindset that had plagued military thinking throughout history, not just on Earth but apparently throughout the galaxy. Commander Zixtel materialized beside their seats, his crystalline form refracting the ship's interior lighting. Second thoughts, human. No one would think less of you for withdrawing from this mission. Sarah looked up at him, noting the subtle challenge in his musical voice. Are you having second thoughts about the mission parameters, Commander? Not at all. I'm simply offering you an opportunity to preserve your species' dignity. The battlefield is no place for theoretical capabilities. Major Pike started to respond, but Sarah placed a hand on his arm. She had learned that rising to every provocation only reinforced alien perceptions of human emotional instability. Thank you for your concern, Commander. I'm confident in my abilities. Zixtel's crystalline features shifted in what might have been amusement. Confidence without experience is merely arrogance. The Separatist snipers have been fighting for 6 months. They know every angle, every shadow, every line of sight in that city. Then it's good that I'm not planning to fight them the way they expect, Sarah replied calmly. The conversation was interrupted by the ship's communication system announcing their approach to the insertion zone. Sarah gathered her equipment, checking each piece with the methodical precision that had become second nature. Her rifle was still the hybrid human-alien design, but she had made several modifications based on her study of the target zone. Captain Voss, the human team's communications specialist, joined them at the airlock. He was a young man, barely out of training, but he had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment in Coalition space. His job was to maintain contact with Sarah during the mission and coordinate with the main assault force. Lieutenant, he said nervously, the Coalition Command wants to establish specific check-in times and abort protocols. Sarah shook her head. No scheduled communications. Radio silence until mission completion or emergency extraction. Any transmission could be intercepted and used to triangulate my position. Through the airlock viewport, she could see the dark landscape of Mordax Prime rushing past below. The capital city was a sprawling maze of buildings and streets, many of them damaged by months of warfare. Smoke rose from dozens of fires, and the occasional flash of weapons fire lit up the darkness. Insertion point in 60 seconds, the pilot announced. Sarah moved to the airlock, followed by the rest of the team. The plan was simple in concept but extremely dangerous in execution. She would be dropped alone at the city's edge and would have to infiltrate through enemy lines to reach a suitable firing position. The Coalition forces would begin their assault 12 hours later, giving her a narrow window to eliminate the Separatist leadership. Remember, Major Pike said as she prepared for deployment, you're not just representing yourself out there. Every alien in the Coalition will be watching the results of this mission. Sarah understood the weight of his words. Success would open doors for humanity throughout the galaxy. Failure would confirm every prejudice and stereotype the aliens held about human capabilities. The airlock cycled open, and the harsh wind of Mordax Prime filled the chamber. Sarah checked her equipment one final time before stepping to the edge. Below her, the city sprawled in all directions, a complex three-dimensional puzzle that she would have to navigate while avoiding detection. She jumped. The drop through the alien atmosphere was unlike anything she had experienced in training. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth standard, and the air had a different density that affected her descent rate. She adjusted her landing trajectory, using the skills learned in countless paratrooper exercises. Sarah hit the ground in a small park on the city's outskirts, rolling to absorb the impact. Immediately she was moving, seeking cover among the twisted remains of alien trees. The sounds of distant warfare echoed through the streets, punctuated by the occasional explosion. Her first priority was reconnaissance. Sarah had studied satellite imagery and intelligence reports, but nothing substituted for eyes-on observation of the target area. She began working her way through the abandoned residential district, staying to the shadows and avoiding the main thoroughfares. The separatist forces had done an impressive job of fortifying their positions. Barricades blocked major intersections, and automated sensors swept the streets with invisible beams. Guard posts were positioned to provide overlapping coverage, and patrol routes had been designed to eliminate blind spots. But Sarah had grown up hunting in environments where a single mistake meant going hungry. She moved through the urban landscape like a ghost, reading the patterns of enemy movement and finding the gaps in their coverage. What the separatists had gained in technological sophistication, they had lost in instinctive awareness. 3 hours into her infiltration, Sarah reached the edge of the inner security zone. Beyond this point, the enemy presence became exponentially more dangerous. Guard towers rose at regular intervals, their searchlights sweeping the streets in overlapping patterns. The target building loomed ahead, its surface crawling with defensive systems. Sarah settled into a concealed position and began her detailed reconnaissance of the target zone. Through her scope, she could see movement in the building's upper floors. The separatist leadership was there, just as intelligence had indicated. Now came the most challenging part of the mission, finding a firing position that would give her clear shots at the targets while keeping her alive long enough to complete the mission. The previous coalition snipers had failed because they had chosen obvious positions that the defenders had already identified and prepared to counter. Sarah smiled grimly as she studied the urban landscape through her scope. The aliens had made the same mistake that overconfident military forces had made throughout history. They had planned for the enemy they expected, not the enemy they were actually facing. Sarah spent 2 hours studying the target building and its defenses before she found what she was looking for. The separatists had positioned their sniper teams in the most obvious locations: tall buildings with clear lines of sight, rooftops with good cover, and elevated positions that offered commanding views of the surrounding area. These were exactly the positions that any military force would choose, and exactly the positions that the coalition forces would expect. But Sarah had noticed something that the alien tactical planners had missed. 3 blocks from the target building stood the ruins of what had once been a massive sculpture or monument. The orbital bombardment had reduced it to a twisted metal framework, creating an abstract maze of bent beams and shattered supports. To most observers, it was simply debris that needed to be cleared away eventually. To Sarah, it was the perfect hide. The ruined monument was positioned at an odd angle to the target building, requiring a shot that no conventional sniper would attempt. The range was over 1,600 meters, and the angle would force her to compensate for multiple variables that most marksmen would consider impossible to calculate. But Sarah had learned to make impossible shots during her years of competitive shooting. Back on Earth, moving through the city toward her chosen position required every skill she had developed during her infiltration training. The separatist patrols moved in predictable patterns, but their overlapping routes created windows of opportunity that lasted only minutes. Sarah timed her movements with mechanical precision, flowing from shadow to shadow like water finding its way downhill. She reached the monument's base just as a patrol passed 2 blocks away. Their searchlights swept across the ruins, but Sarah was already inside the twisted metal framework, invisible among the shadows and debris. She began her climb toward the position she had identified, moving slowly to avoid creating any sound that might attract attention. The interior of the ruined monument was a 3-dimensional maze. Blast damage had created passages and platforms at odd angles, and Sarah had to navigate carefully to avoid sections that might collapse under her weight. But the same destruction that made movement difficult also provided perfect concealment for her final firing position. 40 feet above street level, Sarah found the spot she had identified through her scope. A section of twisted beam created a natural rest for her rifle, while debris above provided overhead cover. The angle to the target building was extreme, but her calculations showed it was achievable with the right adjustments. Sarah settled into position and began her detailed observation of the target building. Through her scope, she could see into several floors of the structure. The separatist leadership had chosen to occupy the upper levels, probably assuming that height provided security. They were wrong. The first target appeared in her crosshairs after 20 minutes of patient watching. General Korath, the separatist military commander, stood at a large window on the 73rd floor, apparently surveying his defenses. He was a massive Thraxian whose rocky exterior made him unmistakable. Intelligence reports indicated he was responsible for the deaths of thousands of coalition troops. Sarah adjusted her scope for the extreme range and unusual angle. The shot would require her to account for the planet's unique atmospheric conditions, the building's slight movement in the wind, and the gravitational effects of Mordax Prime's 3 moons. Any one of these variables could throw off her aim by several feet at this distance. But as she steadied her breathing and prepared for the shot, Sarah heard the distinctive whine of approaching aircraft. Coalition forces were beginning their assault earlier than planned. The early attack changed everything. Sarah's mission had been designed around having 12 hours to systematically eliminate the separatist leadership. Now she would have perhaps minutes before the building went into full lockdown mode. She would have to take shots of opportunity rather than carefully planned eliminations. General Korath moved away from the window just as Sarah was about to fire. She tracked him through her scope, waiting for another clear shot, but he had disappeared into the building's interior. The sound of approaching coalition aircraft was growing louder, and she could see movement throughout the target building as the separatists prepared for the assault. A new target appeared on the 68th floor. Colonel Thexvi, the separatist intelligence chief, stood briefing a group of subordinates near a large window. Sarah adjusted her aim and fired. The shot covered 1,600 meters in less than 2 seconds, passing through the thin atmosphere of Mordax Prime and striking Colonel Thexvi center mass. The separatist intelligence chief crumpled immediately, and chaos erupted in the room behind him. Sarah was already acquiring her next target. Admiral Korveth, the separatist naval commander, had appeared at a window on the 71st floor. He was pointing toward the coalition aircraft, apparently issuing orders. Sarah compensated for the slight crosswind and fired again. Another perfect hit. Admiral Korveth fell backward into the room, and Sarah could see other figures scrambling for cover. The separatist leadership was beginning to realize they were under sniper attack, but they couldn't identify her position. The third target was more challenging. General Zexton, the separatist logistics commander, appeared briefly at a window on the 69th floor before ducking back inside. Sarah had perhaps 2 seconds to make the shot. She fired on instinct, trusting her training and experience. The bullet found its mark just as General Zexton was moving away from the window. He spun and fell, and Sarah saw no movement from his position afterward. By now, the entire building was in chaos. Sarah could see separatist soldiers rushing through the floors trying to identify the source of the attack. Some were setting up protective barriers at the windows, while others were attempting to spot her position with their own scopes. The coalition aircraft were now visible on the horizon, their sleek forms cutting through the alien sky. Sarah estimated she had perhaps 5 more minutes before the building's defenses focused entirely on the approaching assault force. She needed to eliminate as many targets as possible in that window. Target 4 appeared on the 72nd floor. Minister Beltash, the separatist political leader, stood at a reinforced window, apparently believing the thick material would protect him. Sarah's enhanced ammunition proved him wrong. The bullet punched through the reinforced glass and eliminated the minister instantly. Targets 5 and 6 appeared together on the 70th floor. 2 separatist generals stood near a window, presumably coordinating their response to the coalition attack. Sarah fired twice in rapid succession, adjusting her aim between shots. Both targets fell within seconds of each other. The separatist forces were now beginning to return fire, but their shots were scattered and unfocused. They were firing at suspected positions throughout the city, but none of them had identified Sarah's actual location. The ruins of the monument provided perfect concealment, and her chosen angle made her position nearly impossible to spot. Targets 7 and 8 fell in quick succession, as Sarah worked methodically through the separatist leadership. Each shot was perfect, each calculation flawless. The skills that had impressed the coalition, observers on the training range, were now being demonstrated. Under the most extreme combat conditions imaginable, the coalition aircraft were now close, enough that Sarah could make out individual vessels. The main assault would begin within minutes, and the separatist defenses were already shifting to meet the new threat. This was her opportunity to eliminate the remaining targets before they disappeared into the building's protected core. Target 9 appeared on the 67th floor. General Valketh, the separatist ground forces commander, stood at a window directing troops through a communication device. Sarah's shot took him down mid-sentence. 2 more targets to go, and Sarah could see coalition troops beginning their descent toward the city's outer perimeter. The separatist forces were now fully engaged with the approaching assault, giving her the perfect opportunity to complete her mission. Target 10 materialized on the 74th floor, just as the first coalition dropships touched down in the city's outer districts. Supreme Commander Rextal, the overall leader of the separatist forces, stood at a panoramic window apparently coordinating the defense against the coalition assault. He was a massive figure even by alien standards, his 4 arms gesturing rapidly as he issued commands through multiple communication devices. Sarah adjusted her scope for the increased elevation and fired. The shot was perfect, striking Rextal's center mass and dropping him instantly. Through her scope, she could see the immediate impact of his death as subordinates rushed to his position in confusion. 1 target remained, but Sarah couldn't locate the final member of the separatist leadership. Intelligence had identified 12 high-value targets in the building, and she had eliminated 10. The 11th target was supposedly General Korath, whom she had spotted earlier, but lost when the assault began early. The coalition ground forces were now engaging separatist positions throughout the city, and the sound of weapons fire echoed between the buildings. Energy beams and projectile weapons created a deadly light show as the 2 forces clashed. Sarah remained focused on the target building, searching for any sign of the remaining leadership. A movement on the 75th floor caught her attention. General Korath had reappeared, but he was no longer standing casually at a window. The massive Thoraxian was moving quickly through the floor, apparently attempting to reach an evacuation point. Sarah tracked him through her scope, waiting for a clear shot. The opportunity came as Korath paused near a large window to issue orders to his remaining staff. Sarah compensated for his movement and fired. The bullet struck the general as he was turning away from the window, spinning him around and dropping him to the floor. 11 targets eliminated. 1 remained. Sarah swept her scope across the visible floors of the building, searching for the 12th target. According to intelligence reports, the final member of the leadership was Admiral Nelvex, the separatist fleet commander. But minutes passed without any sign of him, and Sarah began to wonder if he had already evacuated or was positioned in a part of the building she couldn't observe. The coalition assault was intensifying, and Sarah could see that the separatist defenses were beginning to crumble. Without their leadership, the enemy forces lacked coordination and were fighting as individual units rather than a cohesive force. The psychological impact of losing their commanders was as significant as the tactical advantage. A flash of movement on the building's roof caught Sarah's attention. A small aircraft was preparing for takeoff from a concealed landing pad, and she could see figures moving toward it. Through her scope, she identified one of them as Admiral Nelvex. The separatist fleet commander was attempting to escape before the coalition forces could capture the building. The shot would be the most challenging of the mission. The aircraft was already starting to lift off, creating a moving target at maximum range. The angle was extreme, and she would have to account for the aircraft's acceleration and changing altitude. Most snipers would consider it an impossible shot. Sarah steadied her breathing and calculated the intercept point. The aircraft was rising at a predictable rate, and Nelvex was visible through one of the passenger compartments. She led the target, compensating for the aircraft's movement and the bullet's travel time. The shot rang out across the city, and Sarah watched through her scope as the bullet found its mark. Admiral Nelvex crumpled inside the aircraft, and she could see the pilot struggling to maintain control as chaos erupted in the passenger compartment. The aircraft wavered in the air before beginning an emergency landing back on the building's roof. 12 targets, 12 perfect shots. Mission accomplished. Sarah immediately began her extraction procedure, breaking down her position and preparing to move. The coalition forces would be advancing rapidly now that the separatist leadership had been eliminated, and she needed to reach the designated extraction point before the building was completely secured. As she climbed down through the ruins of the monument, Sarah could hear the change in the battle's tempo. The separatist resistance was collapsing as word of their leadership's death spread through the ranks. Coalition forces were advancing much faster than anticipated, meeting increasingly disorganized opposition. Sarah emerged from the monument and began moving through the city toward the extraction point. The streets that had been deadly just hours earlier were now filled with coalition troops advancing toward the city center. She identified herself to the first patrol she encountered, showing her credentials and mission authorization. Captain Vextra of the Thoraxian Assault Force stared at her in disbelief. "You're the human sniper? You eliminated the entire separatist leadership single-handedly?" "Mission accomplished, Captain. The targets have been neutralized." The Thoraxian's rocky exterior made expression difficult to read, but Sarah could sense his amazement. "Our forces report that separatist resistance is collapsing across the entire city. They're surrendering in massive numbers." Word of Sarah's success spread rapidly through the coalition communication networks. By the time she reached the extraction point, a crowd of alien soldiers had gathered to see the human who had accomplished what entire battalions had failed to achieve. General Vextar was waiting at the extraction point, his skin displaying colors that Sarah had never seen before. The Zephyrian commander who had mocked her abilities just days earlier now approached with something that looked like reverence. "Lieutenant Chen," he said formally, "on behalf of the Coalition Defense Forces, I want to express our gratitude for your service. Your actions today saved thousands of lives and ended a conflict that had lasted for months." Sarah accepted the thanks graciously, but her mind was already moving beyond this single mission. She had proven that humans could contribute to the coalition forces. But one successful operation wouldn't change centuries of alien prejudice overnight. Commander Zixtel appeared beside General Vexitar, his crystalline form reflecting the flames from the burning city. "An impressive demonstration, Lieutenant. Perhaps I underestimated human capabilities. Perhaps you underestimated the value of adaptability over raw technological superiority," Sarah replied diplomatically. The extraction transport arrived, and Sarah climbed aboard with the rest of the human team. Major Pike was grinning broadly, and Captain Voss couldn't stop checking his communication equipment to confirm the reports coming in from across the city. "Separatist forces are surrendering en masse," Voss reported excitedly. "The entire military structure collapsed when their leadership was eliminated. Casualties are minimal on both sides." As the transport lifted off from Mordax Prime, Sarah looked down at the city below. Smoke still rose from scattered fires, but the organized resistance had ended. Coalition forces were moving through the streets, accepting surrenders and beginning the process of restoring order. Dr. Reyes joined Sarah at the viewport, her expression thoughtful. "You've changed something fundamental today, Lieutenant. The aliens will never look at humanity the same way again." Sarah nodded, understanding the implications. This mission had been about more than military objectives. It had been about proving that humans deserved their place among the stars, that they could contribute something unique and valuable to the galactic community. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now," Dr. Reyes replied, "the real work begins. Today you opened a door, but we still have to walk through it and prove that your success wasn't just a lucky accident." The transport ship carried them away from Mordax Prime toward the Coalition fleet, where Sarah knew she would face new challenges and skeptics. But she had shattered the myth of human inferiority in the most dramatic way possible. 12 impossible shots had changed the course of a war and the perception of an entire species. As they traveled through the darkness of space, Sarah cleaned her rifle methodically, preparing for whatever challenges lay ahead. The aliens had mocked the female sniper, but she had answered with precision, skill, and the kind of determination that had carried humanity from the caves to the stars. The Coalition command ship was a marvel of alien engineering, stretching nearly 10 kilometers in length and housing representatives from dozens of species. As Sarah's transport docked with the massive vessel, she could see through the viewports that word of her success had preceded her arrival. Alien crew members lined the corridors, their various forms creating a bizarre but impressive honor guard. Admiral Thrace waited in the primary briefing chamber, surrounded by the Coalition's senior leadership. The ancient being's tentacles moved in slow, deliberate patterns as Sarah entered, flanked by the human delegation. The chamber fell silent, hundreds of alien eyes focusing on the small human female who had accomplished the impossible. "Lieutenant Chen," Admiral Thrace began, his deep voice resonating through the chamber's translation systems. "Your actions on Mordax Prime have exceeded all expectations. The Separatist surrender was unconditional, and casualties were minimal thanks to your precise elimination of their leadership." Sarah stood at attention, maintaining the military bearing that had been drilled into her during years of training. Around the chamber, she could see alien faces displaying emotions she was still learning to read: wonder, respect, and in some cases, fear. "However," Admiral Thrace continued, "one successful mission, while impressive, does not constitute proof of systematic capability. There are those who suggest your performance was an anomaly, a fortunate accident rather than evidence of human military potential." General Cortex of the Draconian Empire stepped forward, his reptilian features displaying obvious skepticism. "The Draconians have served the Coalition for 3 centuries. We have seen many species claim superior abilities based on limited demonstrations. True military worth is proven through consistent performance under varied conditions." Sarah had expected this response. The aliens were logical beings who relied on data and evidence rather than emotional reactions. One mission, no matter how spectacular, wouldn't immediately change their fundamental assessment of human capabilities. "What would constitute sufficient proof, General?" Dr. Reyes asked diplomatically. "The Coalition maintains training facilities throughout our territory," General Cortex replied. "Each facility presents unique challenges designed to test different aspects of military capability. If the human claims of superiority are genuine, she should be able to demonstrate them consistently across multiple environments." Commander Zixtel's crystalline form shifted colors as he spoke. "The Vorthons concur with this assessment. We propose a series of graduated challenges, each more difficult than the last. Success would demonstrate that human capabilities are genuine and reproducible." Sarah felt a familiar surge of determination. They were essentially offering her the chance to prove humanity's worth through a series of increasingly difficult tests. It was exactly the kind of challenge she had been hoping for. "I accept," Sarah said simply, and the chamber erupted in surprised sounds from various alien species. Admiral Thrace raised several tentacles for silence. "Lieutenant, you should understand the implications of this decision. These tests are designed to challenge the Coalition's most elite snipers. Many of our best marksmen have failed to complete the full series. With respect, Admiral, I'm not trying to match your best marksmen. I'm trying to exceed them." The boldness of her statement sent ripples of reaction through the chamber. Some aliens displayed amusement while others showed what appeared to be offense at her presumption. Major Pike stepped forward. "Admiral, the human delegation requests permission to review the specific parameters of these challenges before Lieutenant Chen commits to the full series." "Of course," Admiral Thrace agreed. "Transparency is essential for a fair evaluation." The holographic display activated, showing a series of worlds scattered across Coalition space. Each planet represented a different type of challenge, from Arctic environments to toxic atmospheres to gravity wells that would crush most organic beings. "The first challenge is on Kithra Prime," General Cortex explained, "an ice world where visibility is limited and temperatures reach -60 degrees Celsius. Previous record holders have eliminated 4 targets under these conditions." The image shifted to show a volcanic world wreathed in toxic clouds. Infernus Station presents atmospheric challenges that interfere with most targeting systems. The heat distortion and chemical composition make accurate shooting nearly impossible. A third world appeared, its surface covered in dense jungle. Verdania offers concealment challenges. Targets are hidden in vegetation so thick that most species cannot penetrate it with conventional sensors. Each subsequent world presented increasingly exotic challenges: zero-gravity environments, worlds with multiple gravitational sources, planets where the atmosphere itself was corrosive to most equipment. The final challenge was on a world where space-time distortion effects made normal ballistics calculations useless. The complete series has never been successfully completed by any individual sniper, Admiral Thrace announced. The current record holder, Sniper Prime Gex of the Thoraxian Elite Guard, completed 6 of the 9 challenges before failing. Sarah studied each challenge carefully, her mind automatically calculating the adaptations she would need to make. The aliens had designed these tests to push the limits of what was physically and mentally possible. "How long do I have to prepare?" she asked. Standard protocol allows for 72 hours of preparation time between challenges, Commander Zixtel replied. This includes equipment modification, environmental conditioning, and tactical planning. And if I fail any single challenge? The series ends, General Korthik said bluntly. Failure at any stage would demonstrate the limits of human capability. Sarah nodded, understanding the stakes. This wasn't just about her personal reputation anymore. The entire future relationship between humanity and the Coalition could depend on her performance in these challenges. There is one additional consideration, Admiral Thrace added. Given the significance of these tests, the Coalition Council has agreed to broadcast them throughout our territory. Billions of beings will be watching to see whether human claims of exceptional ability are justified. The pressure of that statement settled on Sarah's shoulders like a physical weight. Billions of alien observers, each one forming opinions about humanity's worth based on her performance. Success would open doors for her species that might otherwise remain closed for generations. Failure would confirm every prejudice and stereotype about human limitations. I understand the stakes, Admiral. When do we begin? Transport to Kithera Prime departs in 6 hours. You will have standard preparation time upon arrival before the challenge begins. As the briefing concluded and the alien officers began filing out of the chamber, Sarah found herself thinking about the path that had led her to this moment. From a small-town hunting range to the greatest military challenge in galactic history, each step had prepared her for what was coming. Dr. Reyes approached her as the chamber emptied. Sarah, you don't have to do this. What you accomplished on Mordax Prime was already more than enough to change perceptions about humanity. Sarah shook her head. Doctor, with respect, changing perceptions isn't enough. I want to shatter them completely. I want these aliens to understand that humans don't just belong in the Coalition. We belong at the front of it. The next 6 hours would be her last chance to prepare for challenges that no human had ever attempted. But Sarah Chen had never backed down from impossible odds, and she wasn't about to start now. 9 worlds, 9 impossible challenges. Sarah Chen had conquered them all. Standing on the observation deck of the Coalition command ship, Sarah watched as the final world in the series grew smaller in the viewport behind them. Nexus 7, where space-time distortions had made conventional ballistics impossible, where she had needed to calculate shots that curved through twisted space to reach targets that existed in multiple temporal states simultaneously. The mathematical complexity had been staggering, but Sarah had adapted, using principles of physics that most species hadn't even discovered yet. Human theoretical physicists back on Earth had provided consultation through quantum entanglement communication, helping her understand how to compensate for relativistic effects that alien technology couldn't account for. The results spoke for themselves. 9 worlds, 47 targets eliminated, 0 misses. She had not only completed the full series, but had set new records on every single world. The previous Coalition record holders had been surpassed by margins that defied statistical analysis. Admiral Thrace approached her position, his ancient presence commanding respect even after all she had accomplished. His tentacles moved in patterns she now recognized as deep admiration mixed with something approaching awe. Lieutenant Chen, he began, his voice carrying harmonics that the translators couldn't fully capture. In 4 centuries of service to the Coalition, I have never witnessed demonstrations of capability that approach what you have accomplished. Around them, the ship's observation deck had filled with alien officers from dozens of species. Word had spread throughout the fleet, and beings who had initially dismissed humanity as primitive curiosities now watched her with obvious respect. General Korthex of the Draconian Empire stepped forward, his reptilian features arranged in an expression Sarah had learned indicated formal acknowledgement. The Draconians formally withdraw our objections to human integration into Coalition forces. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that exceed our most optimistic projections. Commander Zixtel's crystalline form reflected the light from the stars beyond as he spoke. The Vorthans concur. We propose immediate elevation of human status within the Coalition hierarchy. Your tactical innovations during the challenges have applications that extend far beyond individual marksmanship. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction, but she kept her expression neutral. The political implications of her success were significant, but she understood that this was just the beginning. Proving human worth was one thing. Maintaining that status would require sustained excellence from her entire species. Dr. Reyes joined the group, her scientific mind already working on the broader implications. "Admiral, the techniques Lieutenant Chen developed during these challenges could revolutionize coalition training protocols. Her adaptations to exotic environments demonstrate principles that could benefit all our forces." "Indeed," Admiral Thrace agreed. "The Coalition Science Council has already requested detailed analysis of her methodologies. Several of her innovations contradict our fundamental assumptions about ballistics in variable gravitational fields." Captain Voss approached with a communication pad, his expression showing barely contained excitement. "Lieutenant, you're receiving congratulatory messages from every human colony and Earth itself. The President wants to speak with you personally when we return to Coalition headquarters." Sarah accepted the communication pad, but didn't immediately review the messages. Her mind was already moving beyond this achievement to the challenges that lay ahead. Success brought its own pressures, and she knew that expectations for humanity would now be extraordinarily high. General Vextar appeared beside the group, his Zephyrian coloration displaying patterns Sarah had never seen before. "Lieutenant, the Coalition War College has requested that you develop training curricula based on your experiences. They want to understand how human cognitive processes differ from standard Coalition approaches. I'd be honored to contribute to Coalition training programs." "General, there is more," Admiral Thrace announced, his tentacles arranging themselves in formal patterns. "The Coalition Council has voted to offer humanity full membership status, with all associated rights and responsibilities. Your demonstrations have convinced even our most conservative members that your species brings unique value to our alliance." The implications of full membership were staggering. Access to Coalition technology, participation in galactic governance, trading rights throughout Coalition space, and military cooperation that could protect Earth from external threats. Everything humanity had hoped for when first contact was established. But Sarah understood that with those benefits came obligations. Human forces would be expected to serve alongside Coalition troops in conflicts throughout the galaxy. Her success had opened doors, but it had also committed her entire species to proving themselves worthy of the trust they had been given. Major Pike joined the gathering, his weathered face showing pride mixed with concern. "Lieutenant, there are already requests for human specialists in 12 different Coalition operations. Command wants to know how quickly we can train additional personnel to your standards." Sarah considered the question carefully. What she had accomplished was the result of decades of training, natural talent, and psychological conditioning that couldn't be easily replicated. But the principles behind her success could be taught to others who had the necessary foundation. "Major, I recommend establishing a human training facility within Coalition space. We can develop programs that combine our natural advantages with Coalition technology and tactical doctrine. It won't produce overnight results, but we can create a cadre of specialists who can serve throughout the fleet." Admiral Thrace's tentacles moved in approval. "An excellent proposal. The Coalition will provide whatever resources are necessary to establish such a facility." As the gathering began to disperse, Sarah found herself standing alone at the viewport, looking out at the star field beyond. Just weeks ago, she had been an unknown lieutenant in humanity's first tentative military exchange program. Now she was the individual who had secured her species' place among the galactic community. Commander Zixtel approached her position, his crystalline form refracting the starlight into complex patterns. "Lieutenant, I owe you an apology. I believed your initial demonstration was fortunate circumstance rather than genuine ability." Sarah turned to face him. "Commander, skepticism is healthy. I would have been suspicious too if our positions were reversed. Perhaps, but I allowed prejudice to influence my judgment. Your species has taught me that capability cannot be measured by conventional standards alone. Human history is full of underdogs exceeding expectations, Commander. We've learned to turn limitations into advantages." "Indeed. I suspect the Coalition has much to learn from human perspectives on warfare and problem-solving." As Zixtel departed, Sarah remained at the viewport, contemplating the future. The challenges ahead would be different from those she had faced. Training others, developing new tactical doctrines, and proving that her success wasn't an isolated phenomenon would require different skills entirely. But she had confidence in her species' ability to adapt and excel. The same qualities that had made her successful, curiosity, determination, and the willingness to attempt the impossible, existed in millions of other humans throughout the colonies. Dr. Reyes rejoined her at the viewport. Thinking about what comes next? Always. Success is just the beginning, Doctor. Now we have to prove we can sustain it. I have faith in human ingenuity. We've always found ways to exceed expectations when it mattered most. Sarah nodded, watching as the coalition fleet adjusted course toward their headquarters. In the distance, she could see other ships joining their formation. Vessels from dozens of species now united in acknowledgement of humanity's rightful place among the stars. They had mocked the female sniper, questioned human capabilities, and doubted the worth of her entire species. But Sarah Chen had answered every challenge with precision, skill, and the unshakable determination that defined humanity at its best. The galaxy would never underestimate humans again.